attend different education sessions. I know there's something going on almost every day. And hopefully, it's also given us more time to focus on our health at home. I think for a lot of us, food and cooking have become an important part of our day, even more so than before. Many of us are cooking more, but we're also maybe eating more these days. Um, but there are some benefits when we're not going out to eat and we're cooking a lot more home cooked meals. We have control over the ingredients and the recipes we use, and we can keep our health goals in focus. So next slide, please. So I'm sure all of you have heard about nutrition and healthy eating, whether it's from your friends or family, online, on social media, on TV, or even from other webinars. There's so much nutrition information out there, and sometimes it can get confusing or even overwhelming. A lot of times the focus is on foods we shouldn't eat. So we all hear of messages, eat less salt, eat less sugar, don't eat any fried foods, lots of rules and lots of messages about what not to eat. But this afternoon, I actually want to focus on foods that you should be eating. And so foods to include. And I think it's always easier to add foods to your diet rather than take foods out. So this afternoon, I'll focus on foods to eat more often to take care of your body from head to toe as you age, to stay strong, to have more energy, to have a better memory, and to prevent chronic disease. We'll go through important foods and nutrients to help our brain, our heart, our digestive system, our bones, and our muscles. And each of these topics is quite broad, and I can do a whole webinar on each of them. But for this afternoon, I'll try to focus just on the key messages without getting too technical with the mechanisms and the numbers. Next, please. Okay. Next slide. Okay, thank you. So let's start at the top with our brain health. I'm sure many of you have experienced issues with memory as you age. Things like forgetting names or dates or things that were on your to-do list. It's quite normal to have some memory decline as you age, but it's worrisome when it impacts your day-to-day functioning and independence. We all want to prevent things like dementia and Alzheimer's as we age. And one of my areas of research, as Nazmul Uncle mentioned, is the impact of diet on our brain health. There are many foods and nutrients that have been shown to help with our memory and our cognitive function as we get older. So let's look at some of these. And first we have fish. I'm sure many of you have heard that fish is brain food, and it is. It's high in what we call omega-3 fatty acids, and these are essential for our brain cells. And when we eat fish, especially cold water fish like salmon, trout, mackerel, sardines, these are excellent sources of these omega-3 fats. And we want to aim for eating fish at least 2 or 3 times a week. And it can be fresh, it can be frozen, it can come from a can. Next, we go on to the nuts. So again, I grew up always being told to start my day with 7 badam. And that was actually really good advice because we know that nuts are really good for our brain and our memory. And it can be raw or roasted. Try to make them unsalted and include them every day. We know of all the nuts, walnuts are especially good in terms of brain health because they also contain those omega-3 fats. And then when we come to fruits and vegetables, we know that all fruits and vegetables are excellent, but there are a few that have been shown to have even more benefits than usual for our brain. And first we have the berries. So whether they're red, purple, or blue, we know that berries contain antioxidants that preserve our memory and our brain function as we get older. And you can enjoy them fresh or frozen and try to include them at least 3 times a week. With our vegetables, we know leafy greens, like things like spinach, kale, romaine lettuce, bok choy, are all good things that we should try to include daily. And then we have a group of vegetables which are called cruciferous vegetables. And those include foods like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. And those are things that we should try to include at least 3 times a week. And one of the reasons that these particular vegetables are so healthy for our brain is that they contain vitamin K. And there's a lot of research being done on the role that vitamin K plays in terms of our brain health. So these are all good sources of that vitamin K. And then lastly, we come to legumes. So legumes are your beans, your lentils, your chickpeas, and tofu. These are all foods that are high in protein as well as high in fiber. And so we really want to include those at least 3 times a week. Try more meatless meals. And this is something that actually goes back to Islamic wisdom. And we actually have an amazing hadith from our 6th Imam alayhi salam that says, eating beans increases the marrow of the leg bones, enlarges the brain, and produces fresh blood. So I think we don't need any more proof than that. So, think about some of the foods that maybe you can eat more often. And let's go on to our first poll. So a question for everyone: how often do you eat legumes? So think about the average time that you eat them on a week. Is it 0, 1 to 2, 3 to 4, or 5 to 7? We'll give everyone a minute to complete the poll. Okay. So it looks like everyone's had a chance to key in their answer. Thank you so much for participating. So we can see that most of you do include legumes. Most of you, though, are only including them once or twice a week. A few of you are doing 3 or 4, and 4 of you are including it almost every day. So great job. But for those of you who are maybe not including them 3 times a week, maybe this is something you can think about. How can you include them more often? Okay, so if we go on, and let's talk a little more about our brain health. So as part of my research, I work with the Canadian Consortium of Neurodegeneration in Aging, or the CCNA. And it's a group of researchers across Canada who look at improving the brain health and preventing Alzheimer's in Canadians. So as part of our research, we've developed a brain health food guide. And I know it's hard to read on your screen, but this is actually just a picture of the actual guide. And this is something you can download, and I will share the link at the end. And it goes through the foods to include, how much and how often, as well as the foods to limit for better brain health. And if you're interested in improving your memory or your brain function, or someone maybe in your family who is, this is an excellent guide to use. And it doesn't just work for brain health, it's an overall healthy way of eating. Now, next slide, please. The research done shows that simple changes can actually have a big impact on our brain health. So we don't need to change everything at once, but just focusing on small changes. And we actually, in our research, show differences in as little as 4 months. So after only 4 months of eating well, older adults performed as if they were 9 years younger on tests of reading and writing speed. So for example, we had a 60-year-old whose memory was the same as a 51-year-old. So that's pretty neat. And then we also know that individuals who ate well or ate a healthy diet for 4 years didn't have any memory loss from baseline. We also know that this type of diet lowers your risk of Alzheimer's disease by about 30%, and even more when you combine diet and exercise. So the research study that I am working on right now is called the LEAD study, and we're actually looking at the impact of a healthy diet combined with regular exercise. We just actually finished phase 1 this summer, and we had very promising results. But now due to COVID, we're actually developing a completely virtual phase 2 that inshallah we hope to start up in the spring. I'm also part of a team from the CCNA that's currently developing an online program for adults in Canada called Brain Health Pro. And it covers everything from diet and exercise to stress and sleep, vision and hearing, everything that will impact our memory and brain function as we age. And the goal is to launch this online program that any Canadian can access sometime in the summer or fall of this year. And I'll be happy to share details of that program with the Baraza group once it launches. Okay, so let's move on now down our body to our heart, and let's start off with a poll. So how many of you are living with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, or diabetes? And you can pick more than one answer. Okay, so thank you for those who answered. So we have 22% living with high blood pressure, 36% living with high cholesterol, 14% with heart disease, and 28% with diabetes, which means the majority of us are dealing with something to do with our cardiovascular health. And unfortunately, due to our South Asian genetics, we are more likely to suffer from these conditions. And not only that, sadly, we're also more likely to die from these conditions at a younger age than the rest of the population. But the good news is that we can help to prevent and manage things like our cholesterol, our triglycerides, our blood sugar, and our blood pressure from the foods we eat. So let's take a look at some of these. So heart health is where I primarily do my one-on-one counseling and group nutrition counseling. As mentioned, I work in cardiac rehab, and every year we see hundreds and hundreds of patients of all ages and all backgrounds who have cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Many have already had a heart attack or a stroke, or have gone through bypass, or have had a stent put in. Many of them are already on cholesterol medications. Some are living with diabetes or other risk factors. And our goal is to help them optimize their diet and exercise so they stay as healthy as possible and stay out of the hospital. And we know people who attend cardiac rehab actually lower their chance of, going back to hospital by about 50%. So it's quite successful. So let's talk about the foods that I tell my patients to eat most often. The first one is healthy fats. And the focus over the last 20 years has really changed with fat. It's not about eating a low-fat diet, but it's about eating the right types of fats. So we're replacing animal fats or solid saturated fats with more liquid or unsaturated fats that come from things like olive oil, nuts, seeds, avocados, and fish. Eating these healthy fats will actually help lower your cholesterol levels. And then of all our cooking oils, lots and lots of research around them, the one that always stands out as the healthiest is olive oil. And we know the Holy Quran mentions olive many times, and we also have many hadith about olives. And our Holy Prophet has actually said, eat olive oil and anoint with olive oil as it is a blessed tree. So olive oil should be the main oil that we're using in our kitchen. I think one of the myths I often hear is that you can't cook with olive oil. And that's not true at all. You can absolutely cook and bake with olive oil at normal cooking temperatures, usually up to 400 degrees. And so it's a healthy oil to cook with as well as to use on your salad. So go ahead, use the olive oil when you're making your curry or frying your egg. Um, and then our last food then we move on to fiber. And fiber also can really help with your heart health and cholesterol levels. We're going to talk a little more about fiber in a minute, but I just wanted to mention the impact of fiber on our cholesterol. So when we eat fiber, as it's passing through our digestive tract, it actually helps lower things like our cholesterol and our blood sugars. So eating lots of fiber that comes from things like your whole grains, your fruits and vegetables, as well as your legumes is a good way to help control your cholesterol levels. And then lastly, many of you may have heard of the term antioxidant, or you might have heard of the benefits. It's kind of a buzzword right now. Well, antioxidants are vitamins or other compounds that you find in plants that prevent our cells from getting damaged. You can almost think of them as sort of rust inhibitors for our body. And there are many, many different types of antioxidants that we find in foods like our fruits and vegetables, our nuts, and our olive oil. And you really want to think of color. The more colorful the foods on your plate, the more the different types of antioxidants you're eating. So try to include fruits and vegetables that are red, orange, white or brown, green, blue or purple. Some antioxidants are found in raw fruits and vegetables, and others are actually released when you cook them. And one of the interesting combinations that we've studied is what you get when you combine olive oil with tomatoes, onion, and garlic. And that produces a really powerful heart protective antioxidant combo. And so if you think about making a sauce or a curry where you saute your onions and garlic in your olive oil with tomatoes, that's an excellent thing to do for your heart. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the diets that brings this all together is the Mediterranean diet. And what it is, it's a mostly plant-based diet that can be adapted to any culture, not just countries around the Mediterranean Sea. And it's a diet that's rich in healthy fats, fiber, and antioxidants. And foods at the bottom of the pyramid, like the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, olive oil, and fish, are the foods that you eat more often. And then the foods at the top of the pyramid, like your red meat and sweets, are the ones you would eat less often. Now, if we look at the studies, we know that eating this type of diet can reduce your chance of a heart attack by 30%. And if you already have heart disease, it can lower your risk of dying from a second cardiac event by 50 to 70%. So that's pretty impressive. That's actually more than what a lot of medications can promise us. Next slide, please. So the Mediterranean diet works by helping to lower our blood pressure, our blood cholesterol, and our blood sugars. It also decreases inflammation in our body. I think that's another question I often get, is that I want to eat an anti-inflammatory diet, whether it's for your heart or arthritis or any other condition. Well, this is it. A Mediterranean diet is probably the most anti-inflammatory diet you can eat. You might notice a lot of foods shown in the picture, like the fish and the legumes, are also the same foods that are good for our brain. And we know that eating a Mediterranean type diet can not only prevent heart disease, stroke, diabetes, but also dementia and cancer. So overall, a healthy diet to follow. It's a diet that's tasty and easy to do in the long run. Okay, so let's move on. And now let's talk a little bit about our digestive tract. You may have heard that most diseases start from our gut, and that is so true. More and more research is showing that our gut bacteria or our gut microbiome has a huge role in our body's processes such as inflammation and our immune system. And in order to keep these gut bacteria at healthy levels, we want to focus on foods that have fiber. So we already talked about fiber in terms of lowering cholesterol and blood sugar, but here's another thing that fiber does. It actually helps feed our gut bacteria, and it helps things move through our digestive tract and keep us regular. And I think that's important too. I know a lot of people suffer with constipation, especially if you're not eating well, or maybe you're less active these days because you're stuck at home, or maybe you're taking medications that impact your digestion. But we know eating more fiber as well as drinking more fluids can really keep things moving properly in our gut. So when it comes to fiber, next slide. Adults need about 25 to 40 grams of fiber per day, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. But if you look at the average Canadian, we're only eating half that amount. And again, fibers coming from those whole grains, fruits and vegetables, legumes, and nuts and seeds. And eating a lot of these plant foods will help us get enough fiber. So you've probably noticed a theme here. I keep mentioning some of the same foods. So if we look at where we get fiber, next slide. This is just to give you an idea. So here are a list of some high, medium, and low fiber foods. So the ones that are on the high list will give you at least 5 grams of fiber or more per serving. So for example, if you have a bowl of steel-cut oatmeal or bread that's labeled 100% whole grain, or a pear or an avocado or a sweet potato or half a cup of beans or a bowl of popcorn, those would all give you a great source of fiber. Now, if we look on the medium list, these foods have a little less fiber. So for example, sometimes you buy brown bread that maybe is labeled multigrain and not whole grain. And in this case, it's mostly made of white flour and it is lower in fiber. When you have instant oatmeal, some of the fiber's been removed. And then when you take the peel off your foods, like for example, an apple or a potato, you're removing some, but not all of the fiber. And then the foods in the low fiber group are those that are more processed. So for example, bread or naan that's made with white flour, or white rice, or cereals like maybe your cornflakes or your Rice Krispies, or most of your commercial granola bars would be pretty low in fiber. And so I think that the bottom line here is to eat less processed plant foods to get more fiber, and try to make sure that you include high fiber foods at each meal. Okay, so let's have another poll. And this time it's all about those fruits and vegetables that we keep mentioning. So the guidelines show that most adults need to eat 7 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. And that's roughly about half a plate at each meal. So we just want to know, do you include fruits and vegetables at every meal and snack? So lunch, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Okay, give you a few more seconds. Okay, thank you, everyone. So we see that dinner tends to be the winner here, and most of you, about 76% of you, are including fruits and vegetables at dinner, 71% at lunch, and only 43% at breakfast. So maybe that's something to think of. You know, maybe you're not eating lots of vegetables at breakfast, but is there some way that maybe you can include some fresh or dried fruit in your meal in the morning to help you reach that 7 to 10 servings? Okay, so let's get back to fluids in terms of digestive health. So We know that water helps fiber do its job and it keeps fiber moving through our digestive tract. It's also important for almost every single process in our body. And we know older adults need at least 6 to 8 glasses of total fluid per day, or about 1.5 to 2 liters. And this doesn't have to be just plain water. It can include all fluids like water, coffee, tea, milk, soup. And it's important to remember that as you get older, your sensation of thirst actually decreases. And by the time you feel thirsty, you might already be dehydrated. So it's important to make it a habit to drink water and fluids throughout the day. Keep a glass of water or a reusable water bottle near you when you're watching TV or you're at your computer, and make sure to drink water with your meals. And remember that if you're outside in warmer weather, and hopefully we will get through our winter, and once spring comes, things will be better, we'll be outside more. Just remember that you do need more fluid when you're outside in warmer weather. Okay, so lastly, let's talk a little bit about bone and muscle health. So our bone density as well as our muscle mass both decrease as we age. And for bone health, the two nutrients that are of most important are calcium and vitamin D. Adults need about 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium daily, and we need to get most of our calcium from our diet, and I'll show you in a minute. But for vitamin D, it's very hard to get enough from our diet. And actually, our best source is the sun. But because we live in Canada, we don't get enough sunshine all year round, and especially now in the winter when we're stuck inside. And vitamin D is the only vitamin that Health Canada recommends that all adults take as a supplement with a minimum of 400 international units. And I think most adults are okay with a standard 1,000 international unit vitamin D supplement that you find in your grocery store or your pharmacy. And it can be a chewable or a drop or a capsule. It doesn't really matter. The other important thing is that vitamin D is not only important for our bone health, but it also helps with our immune system. And that's really something important right now with COVID, and lots of research being done around vitamin D and your immune system. I think, though, it's important to remember that you always want to discuss with your doctor or your healthcare provider the exact amount of vitamin D that you need. And this should be true with any supplement, because we know too much can interact with medications, and it can also be harmful if you take too much. So always make sure you discuss the amount that's right for you with your doctor. Okay, so let's look at the calcium in foods. So again, here are some high, medium, and low calcium sources. So we see that foods like our dairy products like milk, or alternatives like fortified soy or almond milk, are our best sources of calcium. They give you about 300 milligrams per glass. I know a lot of people don't drink milk these days, or if they've heard a lot of misleading information that it's bad for you or that adults don't need to drink milk. But in fact, milk and alternatives provide so many nutrients, and milk is mentioned in the Holy Quran and in Hadith. We know in Surah Nahl, it states, "We produce for you drink milk, pure and agreeable to those who drink it." And our sixth Imam, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, has said, "Take milk as it grows the flesh and strengthens the bones." So we do have, Islamic wisdom there as well. I know some people live with lactose intolerance, so you can definitely choose a lactose-free milk, which is just as healthy and just as high in calcium. And if you have a milk allergy, you can choose a fortified alternative like soy beverage or almond milk that has calcium added to it. I often hear patients who say they don't drink milk, but they eat lots of calcium from green vegetables and nuts. And just to put it into perspective, for example, if you ate a serving of broccoli, that's about 50 milligrams of calcium. So you'd have to eat an awful lot of broccoli to get to your goal of a minimum of 1,000 milligrams per day. So it can definitely be part of your calcium intake, but very hard to be your only calcium source. Okay, so let's do one final poll question. How many of you take vitamin D daily? Okay, I think that was a quick one. So I'm happy to see that the majority, 77% of you, do take your vitamin D daily. So keep doing that. That's really important. And for those of you, the 23% who said no, maybe it is an important discussion that you do have with your doctor, especially now being sort of the middle of winter and, being in lockdown. It's super important that you do get vitamin D in your daily routine. Okay, so the final nutrient that I want to talk about is protein. So protein is very important in terms of maintaining and repairing our muscle and our organs as we age. Adequate protein is crucial to maintaining our strength, our mobility, and our immune system as we get older. An easy way to know if you're eating enough protein is to fill a quarter of your plate at meals with protein-rich foods like chicken, fish, lean meat, eggs, cheese, milk, legumes, and nuts. Roughly, this is a portion about the size of the palm of your hand. Okay. And this will help you get to your goal about 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. That's a little bit hard to keep track of, but if you include a quarter plate at meals, you should be okay. And it's also interesting that the research shows that your body actually uses protein better if you spread it throughout the day. So have some at each meal rather than eating it all at dinner time. For those of you who may have a hard time eating a large meal, try including protein-rich snacks in between meals like nuts or yogurt to help you meet your protein needs. Okay, so next slide. So I know I've given you a lot of information. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming, but I'll end off with giving you a very simple summary of how to know if you're eating healthy. And that's to think of your plate at your meals. So you want to start out and fill half your plate with fruits and vegetables. These can be raw, they can be cooked, and you want to aim for lots of color on that half of the plate. Then you're going to fill a quarter of your plate with protein foods. So those are things like your fish or your chicken or your legumes. And then the last quarter of your plate should be whole grains. And it's such a simple concept, but it's such an easy way to plan a healthy meal. And that's exactly what Canada's Food Guide is showing us. And you can actually download a copy of the food guide. We have one stuck on our fridge just as a reminder. And next slide. Here it is also in Gujarati. And you can actually find it in many, many different languages. And it's a free download and lots of other information as well when you download the guide. So next slide. I think at the end of the day, it's important to focus not only about foods that are healthy for you, but you have to enjoy foods. So there are so many different ways to design a healthy meal. So whether it's rotli and vegetable curry and dal, or it's a whole grain pizza loaded with veggies, or it's some tandoori chicken or fish with salad and rice, or it's a tofu stir fry, find healthy foods that taste good to you and that you enjoy. Next slide. And just start with thinking of small changes you can make. Maybe it's adding nuts as a daily snack, or as we saw, we're not eating a lot of fruit at breakfast. So maybe it's adding fruit to your breakfast, or throwing some chickpeas on your salad to increase those legumes, or to maybe add spinach to your chicken curries to get in more vegetables, or maybe adding masala fish to your weekly menu to eat more fish. Every little bit helps. And you don't have to be perfect every day. And so, as Nazmul uncle mentioned, it doesn't mean that you can never eat biryani or samosas or gulab jambus. You absolutely can. All foods can fit. It's just a matter of finding a balance and doing your best on most days and letting food nourish your body and your soul. And so, as promised, here are some resources. As I mentioned, there's so much nutrition information out there. Unfortunately, a lot of it is misleading or incorrect. Some of it isn't based on science, but just on personal opinion. So here are a few evidence-based websites that you might find useful. The first one is Unlock Food, and this is run by Dietitians of Canada, and it's filled with all types of nutrition information, from eating during COVID to food safety to meal planning to eating for various health conditions to label reading to recipes. It's an excellent website. And then one of the projects I work on is developing nutrition information for the Health University website. And it's broken down into Cardiac College and Diabetes College. And it has tons of information on healthy eating, and as well as short videos and information on exercise and psychosocial well-being. It has material that you can download in 7 different languages. And right now during the lockdown, we also offer free weekly webinars for the public on various health topics. So something else you can check out. And then if you do want a copy of that brain health food guide, you can download it from the Baycrest Hospital website. And it should also be on the Alzheimer's Society website in the next few weeks. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. I hope you were able to come away with some useful information, maybe a few foods that you want to eat a little more often, and maybe some things that you can add to your diet. So with that, I will open it up to questions. I know quite a bit has come in through the chat.
Wow, wow, wow. You are a fountain of knowledge, right? Really, really, really are so much info there and all that useful stuff. But thank you so much, Fatim. I have, yes, you're right. Loads of questions. 2:47. We'll try to stop just around 3 o'clock.
Yes.
Question number 1 will be, get your slides. Can we share them?
Absolutely. You're welcome to post the slides.
Wonderful. And we'll share your recording as well.
Sure.
Okay, I'll go through these questions very, very quickly. The first series of questions, virgin oil. Do we have to use, olive oil. Do we have to use virgin oil or any olive oil?
Okay, excellent question to start us off. So the research does show that there are more benefits to using the extra virgin olive oil. It's from the first pressing of the olive, so you get the highest concentration of antioxidants. So that is the one that we recommend the most in terms of the health benefits, rather than something that's labeled a light olive oil, which you might see is lighter in color, but it also has less of the antioxidants.
Okay. On the oils, instead of olive oil, can we use canola, avocado, sunflower seed oil?
Okay. So as I mentioned, I usually recommend olive oil as your main oil for cooking. If you are cooking at an extremely high temperature, so for example, you're putting something on the barbecue, that's where I would use one of the other oils like canola or avocado or grapeseed because they have a higher smoke point. But in terms of the health benefits, the research hasn't shown that they're as good for your heart as the olive oil.
Okay, but otherwise canola, sunflower, all
they're
okay.
all healthy oils, but maybe just not as many of the benefits as olive oil.
All right, great. Question from the vegetarians in the group or in the participants. surely they don't miss out on nutrients by avoiding meat and maybe fish and all that. So they just eat. What specific food should they concentrate on?
Okay, great. So I think, eating more of a plant-based diet is really the way to go. I don't know if all of us can realistically become vegetarian, but we definitely promote eating more plant-based foods, and you can absolutely get all your nutrients from plants. It's including more of the beans and the nuts to get your protein. And it's looking at, for those omega-3s, maybe you're doing flaxseed or chia seed to get those omega-3 fats. They're the only, vitamin that is very hard to get from a vegetarian or a vegan diet is B12. And that's where you might have to look for foods that have been fortified with B12. But otherwise, it's an excellent diet to follow, and we know it has lots of health benefits. Maybe
All
just a
right.
little hard for, I think, all of us to follow. So it's not one size fits all. It's a personal choice.
So for the B12, they could always get the injections or
Yeah, they can
medication.
definitely look at a supplement, or you can get a lot of foods that are vegetable foods or soy milk that's been fortified with B12.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, easy question. Well, easy, I don't know. I've heard this too. Water during meals. Any harmful effects, or should we avoid drinking water during meals?
I don't think so. So personally, I haven't looked at the research. I know there are some hadiths that say you should leave the water to the end of your meal, and maybe that's a good idea. But drinking fluids with food in terms of the science is absolutely fine.
Okay. Someone through surgery has no pancreas. And is diabetic.
Okay.
And you talked about the diabetics. You're doing some research on that. What's the best diet for them?
Yeah. So without a pancreas, again, a Mediterranean type diet. With diabetes, you're going to be looking at more of, the type of carbohydrates and the type of grains and the quantity. But overall, a Mediterranean diet is a healthy diet to eat. I think, if you are dealing with pancreas issues as well, that's somewhere where you might consult with a dietitian to give you some individual advice based on your condition.
All right, great, thank you. Vegetables, should we eat them raw or as we do normally do, cooked?
A little bit of both. So we know with antioxidants, certain antioxidants and certain vitamins like vitamin C are destroyed when we cook things. So you definitely want to include some raw fruits and vegetables. But we also know others like lycopene that you find in tomatoes is actually better when you cook it. So I think ideally it would be a combination of the two every day. So, have your vegetable curry and then maybe, have some fruit on the side or have some salad. So you get the benefit of both.
All right, wonderful. Questions on fruit, just 2 or 3.
Okay.
Is that a good time to eat of the day? Good time of the day to eat the fruits? Morning, afternoon, nighttime before going to bed?
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
No, actually, you know what? I think again, there's some myths about eating fruit before, or after meals, not eating it at night. I like to tell people have fruit with every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
All right. Doesn't matter before, after, during?
No, not really.
Not really. Okay, there we go. How much? Too much of anything is not good, but any advice from you?
Yeah. So I guess it's all about moderation, right? Even too much of any good thing, like if you have too much olive oil or you eat too many nuts, that you want to keep things in balance. So I think in general, as I said, all foods can fit. And I think if about 80% of the time you're following all the healthy eating practices, there's always that room for 20% of the time where you treat yourself and you have foods that maybe don't fit into that Canada's food guide. But food is more than just the nutrients. It's also such a big part of the pleasure we get day to day and the social aspects. So I think, yes, there is such thing as too much of a good thing, too much of a bad thing, but it's all about moderation.
Okay, a couple of last questions because we want to stop just around 3. It's 2:54.
Mhm.
Vitamin D.
Yes.
One of the participants, it's 5,000 IU's international units 3 times a week. Is that okay? Or should it be daily?
Yeah, no, it's a little hard to tell because you might also be getting vitamin D from other things in your diet and the sun. With all the vitamins, we do have upper limits where beyond that we know it might cause potential harm. So with vitamin D, the upper limit is about 4,000 international units per day. So it doesn't mean that 5,000 is necessarily harmful for everyone, but if you are taking a high dose like that, you should be in consultation with your doctor to make sure it's okay with you, and they've maybe looked at your blood work to make sure that's okay.
Wonderful. Zulfikar Qasim wants to ask a question, but Zuli, before I come to you, just one last question which has come in the chat. Processed foods, no, or again, as you say, in moderation?
Yeah. So I guess, when we look at processed foods, there are some processed foods that just are convenient for us. So for example, if we buy a can of chickpeas, that's a processed food, but you're still getting all the benefits of the chickpeas. They've maybe added salt and you can rinse that off, versus something that's highly processed, like something like cookies or potato chips or, something like a donut. I think, again, it's moderation. So we have processed foods that just make our life a little easier and actually help us eat healthier. But there, like bread is a processed food, and I don't think all of us have time to make our own bread. So, there are some that are helpful, but when it comes to those highly processed foods that have lots of salt and sugar and chemicals added to them, those are things that we want to eat less often.
Right. How about all this organic, non-organic, and all that? And coupled with that, the GMOs and non-GMOs, especially for dairy foods like milk. And any thoughts, any comments on that?
Okay. Yeah, so lots of controversy around organic and non-organic. We know that the organic doesn't have the same pesticides or GMOs or radiation, but it doesn't mean that organic produce doesn't have any contamination. It actually does. And so that being said, and the fact that it costs a lot more, I think it's a personal choice whether you do organic or non-organic. I think with certain foods, it makes more sense. So when you go higher up the food chain, like for your meats and your dairy, it might make more sense than your banana, which personally, I don't think there's much difference between an organic banana and a non-organic banana. So you really have to do a little bit of research and look things up. But I think at the end of the day, it's your own choice. With things like GMOs, again, lots of sort of evolving information on GMOs. I think there are very few that are actually allowed in Canada, and the ones that are allowed have been studied well in terms of safety. But again, I think it's a personal choice whether you eat organic or not.
Right. Zulfikar Qasim, if you're still in the audience, can you ask your question in person?
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. Zulfikar Qasim from London, UK. 2 quick questions. Turmeric supplement capsules, are they advisable? Is there an advantage? And quick second question, Doriani. Is Doriani yes, or no? Can I have it with all my meals?
Okay. So I think with biryani, it's if you enjoy it, nothing wrong with it. in terms of the turmeric capsules, definitely, you know, we know turmeric is very high in antioxidants, it's anti-inflammatory, lots of benefits. So if you have a hard time including it in your foods, I'm always a fan of food first and supplement second. So if you can add it to your cooking or have it in your milk and get it in that way naturally, I think that's probably preferable. But in terms of the capsules, I guess it depends on the capsule. In Canada, we have this natural health product number on supplements to show that they've been tested and they're pure and they're safe. I'm not sure in the UK if there's a similar system, but you just want to be careful with the source of the supplement. But I haven't heard anything about any harm from taking those supplements.
And being diabetic, is durian has got too much sugar?
I think all fruits do have some sugar. So I guess it comes down to portion. And a easy way to know if you're living with diabetes with your portion of fruit is to think about a tennis ball size. So what can you fit in a tennis ball? And that's an appropriate portion to have breakfast, lunch, dinner for most people.
Wow. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Fatim, you are a pro. I mean, we can tell.
Thank you so much.
You are a pro, really. Lots of useful information, great time management, answered the questions so well. What more could we ask for?
No, well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
No, what we will ask for more is more of you. So inshallah. We will get you back probably in the fall or maybe this time next year, or we'll certainly fit you in. But I hope you will come back. Really appreciate you making time for us with so much useful information. You could tell, you know, we had almost 100, you know, people who signed on, and maybe there are 2 or 3 people, you know, on each device or whatever watching. So lots of people watching, lots of interest, and this affects us all, the subject. So anyway, thank you again. And yes, we'll share your slides, we'll share your recording, and yes, we'll certainly get you back. But really, thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thanks for everyone who joined.
And thanks, participants. I forgot to mention next week's speaker. Hold on for just 30 seconds. It's amazing. It's the Khoja history. Khoja history for over a century up to 1960, starting with Gujarat to Africa to Western Europe, Western countries. So please, 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 the notice will go out hopefully tonight, and do join in and spread the word, and we'll have a great presentation. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the afternoon and back to work tomorrow. I think so. Bye-bye.